Whatever the scoreline, whatever the situation, I challenge anyone to hit a 50-22 like that and not do a little celebration. Anyway, it's time to start harping on rugby. Hello, my name is Jeff Pagano and welcome to Harpin On Rugby, where with the help of some fellow fans, I get the chance to harp on what's going on with Leinster, Ireland and the wider rugby world. Well, this week we've reunited the duo of contributors who wrapped the Leinster v Lions match a couple of weeks ago. First up is someone earning his 62nd cap. Welcome back to Mr. Tom Coleman.
Thanks for having me again, Jeff. Evening to you, Rich, as well.
Good to have you. And also joining us is someone making appearance number 40. Hello once more to Mr. Rich MIFSUD.
40 already. Well, good evening, gentlemen.
Right, let's crack on with our feature match of the week, which was, of course, Ireland v New Zealand in week one of the 2024 Autumn Nation Series. Well, the weather forecast had been hopeful on the rain front, but there was a light mist around Dublin Fort throughout the evening. The teams took to the field to the sound of U2's Where the Streets Have No Name. Tributes were paid to the late greats Ronnie Dawson and Tony O'Reilly, and after the anthems, the Irish team chose to challenge the haka before eventually it was Damien McKenzie getting things underway, Tom.
Yeah, well, over the last few years of doing this pod, I've tried to be cathartic and hopefully, getting Leinster versus La Rochelle and hoping that the next time we play and been at these games that the next time we'll beat them. So having been in Paris 12 months ago, watching Ireland getting beaten by New Zealand, this wasn't the cathartic experience that I thought we might get. Because it was just one of those days we just didn't go our way. And finishing off the pod before I start is, the better team won for starters. So really no complaints with that result. I get that out of the way in case anyone doesn't think otherwise. Yeah, like we started off really well. We're putting pressure on there. That sort of blitz defense we've seen in blue. There was a little bit of that with Ireland as well. Not as much, obviously. It's not the forte of the Irish team under Farrell, but Porter, charged a good charge down on Jordan. And with a scrum, and it sort of got the crowd up, which sort of needed it. You know what I mean? I think the team at times did their part during the first half to get the crowd up. That's an issue we can chat another day about the Aviva crowd. 150 price euro tickets. Somewhere along the line you lose something. And but look, Porter got the crowd going at the start. As you said, after initially Ireland slowly approaching on the haka, sort of got the crowd up for the first time, and Porter got them up for the second time. But we had a decent enough scrum. But I suppose the very first phase of play in that sortie into their 22, which really resulted in a knock-on. I think it was Aki offloaded to Doris. I suppose really, if you could freeze frame the game there for the first half and look at the remaining, whatever it was, 35, 36 minutes, that really summed up our half. It was sort of error prone. Nearly, but not quite, not exact enough. Several knock-ons. Bundy unusually had a poor night for him. Was his carrying and distribution is just a hallmark of his game. He just had a super last 24 months. But just he had a bad night, and I suppose it summed up the performance of most of the Irish team. You know what I mean? There was only one or two really that for me got pass marks on the night. But yeah, it ended up in a knock-on, and we're just all night we've sort of given New Zealand easy exits with sort of unforced errors. Now, I know New Zealand will probably look at it in their analysis of the game and say we forced a lot of errors out of Ireland, and rightly so. You could sit down and debate each penalty and each knock-on and each error, but we can only look at it from a green point of view. And a lot of the exits we gave New Zealand were Farrell would be pulling his hair out at some of them, stuff that we just haven't done previously in the last couple of years. All seem to come in one evening against New Zealand. Again, we've seen one of the rules of I know we'll talk later on. One of the rules of the sort of the autumn series about getting rid of calling blockers from high balls, and it's one of those things we've been looking at in the first two games. The referee was hot on it in this one. New Zealand were pinged for a block when we went through in a kick, and Ireland went to the post, and Crowley gave us the initial 3 points. So. But he was hot on it all night, and he gave several penalties to both teams for it. As I said, we can discuss later on about that. the thoughts on that and any other rule changes that we have. Um, Again, we gave we gave a penalty away. Then it was Beelum. I thought it was harsh, very harsh on Beelum, um, who looked, just chatting about him. Poor Tom O'Toole come on in the second half. I'm sure Rich will talk about that, and that was a real blow at the time. I know Tom O'Toole was probably our third choice side head, but Beelum, Finlay had really ran out of steam at that stage for a fella that hasn't a huge amount of rugby this season with Connacht, and he was asked to really do 80 minutes because I think O'Toole only lasted 2 or 3 minutes of the game. And but in this instance, he was unlucky with the call, and Damien McKenzie, who's normally quite good with the boot, made a 3-all. I thought New Zealand restarts on the night were quite good. They regathered the next one after we kicked off, and but I think Bundy had another knock on. I think Bundy might have 2 or 3 knock-ons in the first half from carrying is something I've mentioned on. Um, but New Zealand had a few knock-ons as well. I think I think it was Ronan Kelleher forced a knock-on off them in context. So Ireland's physicality and Ireland's defence was quite good. It's only when you re-look back on the game, we can all be frustrated with key moments in the game about knock-ons and just not getting our attack and platform together. But we really did restrict New Zealand to minimal attack in that first half. Like New Zealand, I think we had only 37% either territory or possession, I guess, for 45. One was 37, one was 45. New Zealand had most of the ball and most of the territory. But really, their centres really didn't get into the game at all. Ricky Ione, I know he led the haka. That's all about he led on the night. He was fairly quiet for the whole night and well marshaled by Gary Ringrose. I thought Ireland's line speed in the first half was outstanding. We're shutting down those players at 12 and 13. But for all the good we did, the errors that I've mentioned that Ireland were doing under pressure or not under pressure, was just continuously giving New Zealand sort of entry into our half, and we were compounding that by just giving penalties away in our own half. I think we had 10 penalties given away in our own half. If you're giving 10 penalties away in your own half at any level, I mean, you're really asking for trouble there. So we got the wrong side of the referee a lot, and give away several penalties, and as I said, 10 in our half. Our line out decent enough all night. Some mixed bags. I know Scott, what's his name? Barrett stole one, and the other, his partner Vice, stole one throughout the game as well. So one of them, there was a complete malfunction on. I think maybe on Rich's section in the second half. So a bit of a mixed bag. But Ronan Kelleher, as we know, watch him in blue. Line out is probably his weakest part of his game. But the for a guy who only played 11 minutes, I think this year, his ball carrying, his physicality, his scrummaging was quite good. And so I think there might have been one scrum penalty in the game against us. I think maybe two. Later on, there was a couple as our front row was either turn or we just had more inexperienced guys on or guys with less caps. I think we might have been a couple of penalties there, but all in all, I think our scrum went fairly decent, and Keller's quite good at that. But it was sort of after the first 15 minutes, the combination of us just error strewing, some set piece malfunctioning, and knock-ons, continuously giving a team like New Zealand entry into our half. Pressure would eventually start to tell, and I think from about the 15th to the sort of 25th or 30th minute even, there was a lot of pressure from New Zealand on us. Talea got one out wide after about 10 or 12 phases, and it looked for all intentions in the world at one or two more phases, and New Zealand were in. But some good cover tackling and some good scramble, and we were able to keep them out. Again, we were lucky enough. I think Tyke Burns sort of stripped another Kiwi in the tackle as well again. So, but this was a period of pressure where New Zealand were coming. We gave a series of ways of penalties in the middle of the half as well. There was one instance where the scrum was under pressure. There was a crooked line out. The ref, after the scrum, the ball pops out, there was a reset there as well. And New Zealand take a quick tap off that, and lazy enough going back. You're always shouting at your players, back 10 as quick as you can, face the ball, but it was like a no arms or a high tackle there. and obviously New Zealand opted for a pen, and Mackenzie made it 6-3. Um, for the life of me, I was screaming at the television at Crowley, and I'm not getting at Crowley in per se. I'm talking about Ireland, and even Frawley when he came in did it, was we were continuously kicking restarts to Geordie Barrett. Why we kept kicking the poxy ball down Geordie Barrett? 6'5". Look, he learned, as a Mead man, he learned to play GAA above in North Mead with Kells, or just outside Kells. So, he has all the skill set to be catching high balls out of, and we continuously kept kicking it down. Little simple things like that. Just go to the opposite side. I know they were on a bit of a. We were dropping them well. Just what I mean by well is they were dropping nicely outside 22. So I'm not getting at Crowley's technique, or I'm not getting about where he was dropping it inside the 20, out just outside the 22. It's just when you've got a target like that, you avoid. And Barrett must have taken half a dozen to eight restarts. Thankfully, he was off the pitch for 10 minutes, so we avoided him, other than kicking one out in the full and him catching it in the bloody sin bin. I wouldn't have surprised that would have happened at that start. But look, we kept kicking it to Geordie. And yeah, just we were under pressure at that stage, with our defence being super though. But we were lucky enough just to be sort of 9-3 down at that stage, because New Zealand ended up getting another penalty as well. It was a penalty for not rolling away, and I think that was the first time the Barry, the ref, had a word with us just about the number of penalties, because the pressure was telling. Even at that stage, we were blessed to be sort of 9-3 down. I am slightly contradicting myself, because I thought our defence was good and physicality was good, but we just really hadn't fired a shot in attack whatsoever in that first half. Maybe in our, when we're summing up, have some thoughts on obviously my cat is leaving, and Ireland are very much what I'd say a well-drilled team that play to a lot of patterns, and every player knows those roles. So if there's changes in that, that may be the Achilles heel in the system, where you have a new backs coach and they're trying to implement their style, that it has an effect on the effectiveness, rather than be more fluid in attack and more individualistic, if you want to call it that, like New Zealand are. They're a little bit more pliable or adaptable to having new coaches in, if that makes sense what I'm trying to say. I just think Goodman is going to need all of this time over the autumn internationals and into the Six Nations to bed in what he needs to do. But as I said, we were lucky to be 9-3 down, and we got just before half time. There was a nice take by Tyg Bourne on a line out. Bundy had a good crash ball, and we got some good territory into the 22. We managed to not spill it this time, Bundy. So there was a penalty for not rolling away. So it was a very kickable pen for Jack, but it was slightly delayed because the TMO intervened. I think it was our friend from the URC, Mr. Whitehouse, who does like to get on, like to get his face on the telly for being TMO. And it was looking at a high hit from Geordie on his new teammate Gary Ringrose, going to be playing 12 and 13 together maybe a few times. And I went for a bunker review, and it stayed yellow, as we found out during half time. And it was an easy kick for Crowley to make it 6-9. But yeah, just frustrating half, error strewn. Some of our set piece wasn't going well. We didn't use the kicking game. It was a greasy night at times. We didn't use the kicking conditions. I think we gave the back three at New Zealand too much respect if we didn't kick to them. We're probably, excuse my French, afraid of our shite of Will Jordan at fullback. And but sometimes you're at home. You have to trust your team, your players are capable of, rather than be slightly overly. I thought we were slightly overly worried about New Zealand's perceived strengths rather than playing to our own. We were more worried about what their key people could do, rather than what our own key people could do. So sometimes when you're in that defensive mode, it shows in the defensive mindset. It shows on we the minority of the ball, and we the minority of the territory. And a lot of that can be a mindset. I don't want to get into the psychology of playing international rugby, because I'm nowhere near that level. But it just seems, if that message was during the week, psychologically can creep into the players to be in a little bit more of a defensive mindset. But look, it was our first game since we played in Durban, and it was New Zealand. In New Zealand, they played 8 games in between, and that also showed. It would have been nice to play New Zealand in game 4, But yeah, 9-6 to us at half time. Very fortunate just to be 3 points down because we really hadn't fired a shot in attack.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the attacking limitations was the issue of that half. I mean, overall, as depressing as it was watching the game of the night, it wasn't as bad. I didn't think it was as bad watching it the second time, if that's possible. But it is true that New Zealand, they deserve to be ahead at the break. We were doing well against them. We were forcing mistakes. Of course, like you say, we would notice our own mistakes more. But our defense was doing well. They were shooting up well, and they were forcing them into knock-ons as well. But the difference was obviously they were making more of their opportunities when they got to, and they were forcing those down at our end of the pitch. Now you could argue that third penalty of theirs, was it the third or the second one, where they spent a lot of time and they ended up choosing. They actually had a choice. They could have kicked another one to the corner, and they had one right in front, and they chose the one in front and took the 3 points. That was almost a success. That was almost a success for our defense to having held them out. But it was just a case of getting. I mean, if just Bundy holds on to one of those, and and you don't want to blame it all on him. And a lot of times a knock on could be something that started further in, at a different stage of the move, whatever. It's not always the person that drops it that's at fault. But if he just holds on to one of those, as we saw at the end of the half, when he had one successful carry on a set piece into the 22, boom, boom. Not only just the yellow card, but 3 points just before the break as well. That was a positive outcome when things actually did click. So there were signs at the end of the half that, once we did get those things right, we could actually hurt them. And we knew going into halftime that we'd have that 10 minutes after the break. What did you make of it, Rich?
Yeah, I too felt that, going on what Tom's already covered, I felt we were lucky to go in only 6-9. That was my sense of that first half. We didn't fire a shot. But that final phase of play, which is the one where Geordie Barrett got sin-binned, I thought, oh, maybe there's something here, because they appeared vulnerable. Of course, and it's always the case. As soon as you put it under pressure, then you really see what people are made of. And they look vulnerable in that phase of attack from us. And I felt, perhaps with a nice tactical team talk at halftime, we may shift this and we may, turn it around. We almost did, but I'll cover that in my segment. But yeah, error-strewn, clunky in attack. Our defense definitely on top, and I think both defenses were primarily on top throughout the course of the match as a whole. Very attritional in that respect, but yeah, not. There was a great degree of rustiness, and I know that Andy Farrell said that was not an excuse, but they're only human at the end of the day, and people are rusty. If you haven't played for a long period of time, not least with people returning from injury like Kelleher, Finley Bealham hasn't played that long. It does take its toll. It's that much is obvious, and like Tom just said, I just wish we'd played the All Blacks in our third or even fourth game, and I think you'll see a different Ireland setting up. But hey, it was what it was. Much like you, I was really disconsolate after the match on Friday night, obviously, as I suspect most of us were. But on rewatch, I thought, well, actually, we haven't been that bad. It's just that we weren't positive enough to get over the line, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I mean, it is a point that does have to be made, that we're like the Irish team was coming together cold, as it were, as you both said. They hadn't played since July against the Springboks, whereas then New Zealand had been together as a unit, like for all through that time, playing matches, playing all through the Rugby Championship and traveling, and then they had Japan and England as well up to now. You can't expect Andy Farrell to say that at a press conference. Of course, he won't mention that, but that's what we're here for. We're the fans, and it is a real fact. It's not an excuse. You do have to be ready. You have to be up for big test matches like this, whatever way they are. But it is worth mentioning. But anyway, listen, there was optimism going into halftime, despite the failings of the first half. We had that attack just before the end. It brought us points. We had Jordy Barrett going off for his yellow card. And the halftime score, like we said, was Ireland 6, New Zealand 9. Well, before we return to the pod, first a little reminder of all the different places you'll find us in the Ruggersphere. Myself and the lads are recording an extra chat for our YouTube channel, looking at the new law variations. And to get access to all our latest content, as well as our presence on all the different social media platforms, you can bookmark us at linktree/Harpin On Rugby. Please be sure to comment, like, share, and subscribe as needed. And so we learned during the halftime break that Jordy Barrett's yellow was not being upgraded. And after being shown footage of Andy Farrell doing his best in the dressing room to recreate that Vodafone ad by rallying the troops, it was Jack Crowley getting the match underway. Rich.
He was indeed. And you know, I think the point needs to be made that was never going to be upgraded to a red. I don't think it deserved it. And the yellow card was was the absolute right decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The kickoff from them produced. You know, they kicked to us, we kicked back, produced a penalty for the no access experimental law, which I know we'll talk about this later, but I certainly favor. I think it's a really good law change. So there we were in their 22. We hadn't seen an awful lot of that in that first half, other than the final stages. We went to touch. There was some, you know, we set up the maul, but Sam Cane managed to pilfer the ball from the maul. Luckily for us, when he went, I mean, this was on the 5 meter, so he went back into his into the end goal area, and with a very good combination of. I think it was James Lowe, and we managed to get him to ground, so that gave us a 5 meter scrum. Caelan Doris carried well from the base, off to pass the ball off to Jamison, back to Gary, who again carried well, got us closer to the line. Jamison off the base of the ruck passes it to James Ryan. Again, Jamison gets involved, and there's a trend developing here. I felt he was our best player on the night, quite apart from the fact that this is his job. And so he passes it to Porter, who takes another curry almost to the line. Then it's Jamison over to eventually finds Josh with a lovely angled run from about 2 meters out, and the pass manages to create the imbalance as between Josh and the would-be defender, and he crashes over, and all of a sudden we are very much in the ascendancy. Try converted, 13-9 up, and you could sense that, sadly it didn't happen, but you could sense at that time that there was something special happening, something special brewing. Would seem to have found our mojo. No doubt they'd had a fly in the ear from the coaches at halftime, and we came out all firing on all cylinders. The next couple of minutes, to my mind, is where the match was lost. There was a pivotal moment in this. Their kickoff goes long, we kick back. They go quickly from the line out, but the chase from James Lowe and Jamison and Andrew Porter is absolutely excellent. I think I need to mention Andrew Porter here. What a bloody athlete he is. I mean, quite apart from the fact that he was probably one of our best players on the night. You know, those chases. I think they even mentioned on comms. I mean, O'Driscoll mentioned on comms that he's pretty much, if not the first, the second person chasing, and you know, this is a prop forward who has all the other workload that he has to get through during the course of the match. So anyway, the long and the short of it is, we turn it over in their 22. Caelan Doris again picks up, carries well, but here is where we come again to the unforced errors and our discipline, which was what cost us throughout the match. We're five meters out. James Lowe, in his enthusiasm, and we can't knock him for that, but in his enthusiasm, is adjudged to roll a neck, and New Zealand get the turnover. This was most certainly a pivotal moment. We had them on the ropes. We really did have them on the ropes at that point. Had we scored from that, and the likelihood was that we could have very likely scored because they were scrambling like crazy from the speed of ball and the carries, etc. So pretty much a replica of the try. I was about to say our first try of the try. Sadly that didn't happen, and I think you could almost sense that they were deflated from that point on. So anyway, they get the penalty, a kick for touch on their own 10-meter line. We give a penalty. A minute later, we give a penalty on our own 10 meters, or just between our 10 meters and the halfway line. Mackenzie steps up to take the kick. And even despite doing a Garbisi with the ball, he manages to slot it beautifully from about 45 meters out. So all of a sudden, despite this wonderful surge of action, they peg us back, and it's a 1-point game yet again. And to be perfectly honest, for the next 7 or 8 minutes, the play is condensed between the two 22-meter lines. Nothing much really happening, other than to say that both defenses were on top. So there was a whole load of disruption. Both sides trying things, both sides not making much meters. And like I say, this eventually led, and I think this is where fatigue started kicking in, to the 56th minute where Finlay Bealham gave away a cheap pen for not rolling away. And if you look at it, you look at the replay, he's just absolutely knackered. And he makes little, if any, effort to roll away, at least show a picture to the ref that he's at least attempting to move away. So he doesn't. And shortly afterwards, thankfully, the kick is missed. And a minute later, we have changes being run. We've got Frawley, Herring, Henderson, Tomo O'Toole coming on. Sadly, and this is where the fatigue really kicks in for the poor guy, Tom O'Toole gets concussed, so he has to go off in the 59th minute. So he's just on the pitch for about a couple of minutes, and of course, poor Finlay Bealham, who was already knackered, has to come back on. So already, he was already becoming a liability through fatigue. This just compounded the issue. So anyway, we head into the final quarter of the match, 13-12 up still, but shortly after that, there's a scrum. Bealham is adjudged to angle in. This is about a good 40 odd meters away. There's been a couple of punters since the match picking this up as being a controversial decision. I am hardly an expert on scrums, but from the angles that you see, it seems pretty evident that he just gets overpowered, and he starts angling in, and then in fact the whole the body shape of our scrum just angles in towards the left, and it goes down. So anyway, the penalty is slotted. New Zealand retake the lead and retain it obviously to the end of the match, and then sadly our impact players didn't have much of an impact. Well, certainly not a positive impact. They had a negative impact. Ian Henderson gave away a cheap pen 30 meters out. Again, Tom has alluded to the Aviva crowd, and who on earth are these idiots who start whistling and booing the opposition kickers? You don't see them when there's a proper rugby match. Not that this wasn't, but when proper rugby supporters turn up at rugby stadia. And I know there's a whole debate about it. They're most definitely not going to go into it or debate any further on it. But I just thought I'd make the point. I really don't like it. I know the French do it, and I know the South Africans do it, but we don't have to do that, surely. So anyway, time moves on. We're now 5 points behind. So, at the very least, we need to score a try to tie things up. New Zealand in possession, with about 12 minutes to go, just outside our 22. They recycle, go right to Talea, who I thought was policed really well by Hugo and James Lowe because he's a real danger. He's really powerful, as he showed against England last week. So Hugo manages to tackle him about 5 meters out, but they recycle quickly. A missed pass from Mackenzie to Sititi, and I think this is where we can say that we weren't that bad. Sititi, we kept quiet for large portions of that game, and he had the freedom of Twickenham on last Saturday when he played there, but we really kept him shackled. But on this occasion, he was loose. He'd stayed wide left, as indeed did Armour, who passed the ball to Will Jordan, and of course Will Jordan scores from there and scores from further away. So all of a sudden, after this very well worked try, they basically tied us all up on our left wing and moved the ball very quickly to their left, our right, and they created the overlap. It was a 3-on-1 at one stage, and Will Jordan with an easy run in to score. So very well worked try. They all of a sudden go 10 points clear because the conversion was missed, and of course we're playing catch up football here, and if we'd been making mistakes earlier in the match, these were just compounded by the desire to gain territory and possession. Just to highlight an unbelievable kick from James Lowe. He had absolutely no right whatsoever to do that. But this guy is
the cheek of him celebrating and being happy about it after he did it. He's getting an awful stick.
He is getting a lot of stick. Yeah,
he's being compared with Ben Earl, but I don't think they're the same things at all.
No, and simply because I think at least from and of course you can only judge this from sitting in my front room watching the match. But the crowd seemed to be very subdued, very quiet, and I appreciate that this is a symbiotic relationship as between the players and the crowd, and the crowd really weren't getting much from the players, sadly. So, but at the very least, I think he was trying to work them up again, get them up into a frenzy. So, which is, I say this because I think that's the distinction as between him and the Ben Earl celebrations, that we've seen on many occasions. So, anyway, we a number of carries from the line out because it was a 50-22, but yet again another great defensive shift from the All Blacks, and Adi Sevilla was in like a shot to get a turnover penalty 5 meters out from their own line. So I think pretty much this was our final realistic shot at it. And the next few minutes leading up to about 78th minute, I've called this in my own notes, the ifs, buts, and maybes. We tried an awful lot. There were misses, there were knocks on, some trying to be positive, some which were just basic errors, both of them from Kieran Frawley, who most definitely didn't have his best few minutes in green. But to be fair to him, what he did try, admittedly, didn't necessarily come off. But there was a nice little chip just over the blitzing All Blacks defense, which Mac Hansen touched with his fingertips, but sadly couldn't regather, because otherwise he was away. I don't think Mackenzie, who's only a slight frame himself, would have managed to stop him. And that could have changed things. Still 3 minutes to go on the clock. Sadly, it didn't come off, but at least they were trying something. And then the game just pretty much petered out. We managed to get another line out in their 22, and I suppose only fittingly, the line out gets stolen by the All Blacks from a really rubbish line out from us, from Rob Herring, and then they just go a couple of phases and kick it out, and game over. 13-23.
Yeah, I mean, after such a good start to the half, where we really we somehow brought the momentum that was at the end of the first half through, and it was a really well planned restart. It worked perfectly. We were talking about those restarts that were going to the same area to where Jordy Barrett was in the first half, but when we had this restart. And it's great when you have that control to start a half, especially in a big game like this. When you have that control to start to sort of dictate how the second half begins. They put it in a different area, and that was seemingly a plan. They were. It was almost like they were using that rule to win that penalty, and it worked a treat. And of course, having done that, they had to go on and score. And given how the attack had been going, there was no guarantees of that, but. They managed to persevere. They held Sam Cane up over the line. They needed to get the try. They got the try, and it was a really great position from there. But just from that moment on, it's just everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong for the rest of the game, like between the knock-ons and the drops and the just a bad luck with, like you say, with Tom O'Toole as well. Philippe, I mean, there was another option there. It would have meant Andrew Porter playing the full 80 minutes, but they could have brought Church on and had him do a bit of tight head. But I suppose they wanted the specialists in there, given the way the All Blacks were dominating. I thought they were dominating sort of the hits. They were getting in underneath, and once the shove started, we were on the back foot with some of those penalties. But listen, then you had the likes of Henderson giving away penalties. It's not like him. You had Frawley dropping a couple. It's not like him. All these combinations. It was all on our side of the thing. One of those sticks. One of those works. I mean, I was joking sort of about James Lowe's celebration and stuff, but the fact of the matter is, even though there was 10 minutes to go, if we get a try from there, that we're in that game. We're still in the game with 10. There's absolutely no question the game was still alive if we could have scored from there, and we need to be expected to score from there. It's just that we weren't. It just wasn't the standards. The fact still remains. We're in the top 3 in the world. There's a triumvirate there at the moment: New Zealand, South Africa, and Ireland, and France sort of on the outskirts of that. But to stay there, you can't make those mistakes. That's the bottom line, and it just wasn't going to be. And a team like New Zealand is always going to take advantage. What did you think of the second half, Tom?
Yeah, I think I think Rich just covered a lot of it off pretty well there yourself. I think one of the frustrations I had from the second half and through the match throughout, if anyone looked at the New Zealand England match the week before, New Zealand, the way they mark is they if their defensive line is set up, they're sort of hitting the player, and they got pinged a lot of times for hitting the player off the ball. So they're sort of preempting the pass. And you would think, looking at Ireland over the last 2 years, Ireland are better at doing that than England, as in pulling in players into, we're pulling back passes in behind pods, disguise passes inside. You look at the tries we scored against South Africa with Conor Murray coming through off disguise passes. It was sort of set up for us to test that again. There's no doubt New Zealand were going to be working on that all week, and obviously they were. But we never really fired a shot to test that. That was a weakness in their game. So that was frustrating from that point of view, that we just didn't try and target an obvious area of weakness that they had the week before. Because it's very hard, no matter, it's impossible in a week, especially when you're flying from London to Dublin, to iron that all out, as in you defend in a certain way. New Zealand defend in a certain way, whether they're watching the man rather than the ball. It's not as simple as that, but that's the layman's terms way I can describe it. But you would have thought that we would have pulled a few strings, a few disguise pass to try and test that, but we never really fired a shot at that. And really, the only thing I'd say about the second half was one of the positives was in our defence and our counter rucking. We gave young Ratama at 9 a third time all night. So when you've got the New Zealand 9, you think back to the great Aaron Smith or TJ Penanara, pulling the strings for New Zealand. And if you can say to yourself, well, if we play well enough that we can take those guys out of the game, it gives you a hell of a chance to win those games. But even with that, we didn't have build on that platform. So that was quite frustrating. And as Rich says, look, 57, whatever it was, 58 minutes, both teams made a lot of substitutions. We did first. And unfortunately, we had no impact from the bench. I'm not throwing that all and blaming the bench. We're coming on to a team that wasn't really playing well. So this is not me picking on the guys from 16 to 23. But we got really zero impact off the bench. I thought the only one that gave a little bit of impetus in the last 10 minutes was Jamie Osborne. And to me, he came on for the wrong centre. Unfortunately, Bundy was the one that really, nothing against Bundy, he's been class, and he'll be the first guy to hold his hand up and go and, had a bad night with some carrying. But I thought Ringer kept our friend Rico quiet all night, and it would have been good to see Osborne at 12 rather than putting him on at 13, because where he could do a little bit more. He's got that cultured left boot, and he could have given some help to Frawley as a sort of extra distributor. Kieran, unfortunately, Frawley had a mare, and it just shows the highs and lows of international rugby. He was absolute hero in Durban, and I'm sure he's ruined the 20 minutes or 25 minutes that he had against New Zealand. But look, he'd pick himself up and go again. Lesson learned, you know what I mean? But yeah, frustrating half. New Zealand definitely deserved the win. But yeah, just some of the areas that we could have went after them, and some of the platform, like I said, we really give Ratama a bit of a hard time. we weren't able to build on that with attack. So yeah, a night of what ifs and a night of frustrations. But hats off to New Zealand. They came to Dublin. We haven't lost in 4.5 years since March 21 against France. So they'll be happy with the win, and we have to think of it as a good scalp for them to beat Ireland in Dublin. They haven't lost there in 21 or 22 games in 4.5 years. So well done to NZ on the win. They deserved it on the night, and no complaints from me anyway.
Exactly. Well, listen, like what I mean, there were some kind of silver linings there to be found throughout. It wasn't all bad, but obviously overall, especially since we were ahead, it was disappointing. And like we say, the final score was Ireland 13, New Zealand 23. Well, elsewhere in the Autumn Nation series, there was a thriller at Twickenham as the lead changed hands 4 times in the last 15 minutes before Joe Schmidt's Wallabies pinched a 42-37 win over England. Then Felipe Contepomi's Pumas prepared for their visit to Dublin next Friday with 5 second-half tries in a convincing 50-18 win over Italy in Udine. And also on Saturday, France racked up their own 50-burger in putting Eddie Jones's Brave Blossoms to the sword, with the All Blacks next up for Fabien Galtier's side. Then on Sunday in Cardiff, the Flying Fijians were the first in this series to take advantage of the controversial 20-minute red after Semi Radradra had a yellow upgraded in the first half before 15 of his teammates were able to close out a 24-19 win over Wales. And finally, at Murrayfield, Scotland weren't so lucky against the Springboks as lock Scott Cummings also had a first half 20-minute red, but the world champions managed to keep them at arm's length to secure a 32-15 win to take over number 1 spot in the world rankings. Well, going back to our feature match on Friday, afterwards at the press conference, Andy Farrell said, quote, "We compounded too many errors. The energy or the accuracy weren't what was needed to win a big test match like that," end quote. And from the fans' point of view, at the full-time whistle, John Hyland said on our Facebook page, quote, "A few performances to forget, but the lads have credit in the bank. This was our first loss in 19 games at the Aviva, and it was to an All Blacks team with a lot more recent game time than us," end quote. Do you disagree, or would you have said the same thing a different way? Well, we always leave a post open on the Facebook page after Leinster and Ireland matches. Why don't you join in the conversation next time? And so now this brings us to our final thoughts, starting with Tom.
Yeah, I think, without the cause repeat myself, yeah, disappointing night. We didn't quite get rid of the scars of Paris in 23 against New Zealand. Better team won in the night. Yeah, I think Andy Farrell will be looking for a bit of a bounce back after we look back to the first test in South Africa, how he, questioned the guys' manhood about getting physically beaten up, and they responded in kind. So I'd really hope on Friday against Argentina, who had a very good win against Italy, stuck 50 points on them, that Ireland have a good week in training and really bounce back and really need now to put a performance in against Argentina. So there's that little bit of pressure on them. And Argentina are a pretty good team. They've had 3 wins to bet all 3 teams down, the other teams in the rugby championship. So they, definitely won't be easy, and they'll feel Ireland are slightly vulnerable and maybe questioning themselves. But I think we've covered a lot of the match itself on where it went wrong and what we need to fix. Hopefully the guys that badly needed minutes, like Kelleher, Bealham, Henderson, and on. This will stand to them. And Peter O'Mahony came on for, I know it was only the last 10 minutes, I think, as well. He only had half an hour, or he had only had a half against when Munster played the All Black select team down in Cork. So that'll all help get minutes in the bodies. But yeah, no complaints with no complaints with the result. Just a frustrating night where we didn't really fire a shot in attack against an All Blacks team that are in a little bit of transition. They're not as much in transition as people think. You know what I mean? If you fast forward to the next World Cup, a lot of these players will be playing. It's not like they're trying out a whole load of new players. Yeah, they're probably trying out at halfback, at 9, I should say, a little bit. But this is the New Zealand team that's going to be thereabouts for the next 3 to 4 years. And they have some issues, and always looking at New Zealand when they came to Dublin over the years and years, no matter how bad or good we were, it's slightly frustrating when New Zealand don't have to play great and they still win. I don't mean that. That's not an insult. That's a compliment if you can win when you're not really playing that well. So it felt a little bit like that. We limited them to a certain degree in attack. We spoke about the players that on their side that didn't really get on the ball as much as they'd hope. And yeah, just on the back of that, and given their scrum halves a bit of a third time, just not to build on that platform, and a lot of unfair stares, as we mentioned through the game with Bundy and stuff like that, etc. Not singling out Bundy, but just he was one of many, and yeah, frustrating night. But look, they've got to hopefully to get it out of their system during the week and be ready for Argentina on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a time when if we'd held the All Blacks to just one try against us, and we knew that we'd made a few mistakes and could have won it, that would be a positive kind of thing, because we probably figured it would be frustrating, but we figured that we couldn't do better. We wouldn't think that, but at least this time we know that we can play better. We can do better than that. We do have a level up we can go. We've seen ourselves do it. It's just a question of, like you say, regrouping and showing that against the Pumas next week. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, just picking up on that point. When you're frustrated because you haven't beaten the All Blacks, then you're in a good place. But 5, 6, 7 years ago, it's exactly what you described. You just hoped that they wouldn't put 60 on you, because that's where we were and they were. So anyway, that taking that or putting that point across, I suppose the only other saving grace is that they're all fixable. All the issues that we had on Friday night are fixable. They were unforced errors, discipline. And I think it was 13 pens, I think, and pretty much the same along unforced errors. Our tactics were clunky. There was a lack of cohesion. And I'm talking about attack here. Defense, we stood up, and I think we did pretty well. And the other one, it was attitudinal. There was only 3 players really in my mind who actually stood up and were counted, and that's no guesses for no prizes for guessing who they were. That's Jamison, Ports, and Josh. The remainder well below par. And just to pick up on a point that Tom made, our attack was clunky. If this is a bedding in of the Andy Goodman system, perhaps. I just got the sense it was as clunky as Leinster have been over the last couple of years, not transitioning well. We look far more fluid now, as in momentarily wearing my blue cap in attack. But Ireland seem to have, at least in this first match, and it's wrong to judge them or judge him and his influence on the team in just this one match where people didn't really turn up properly. So let's see how we progress throughout the autumn internationals. I expect a reaction. Andy Farrell is not the kind of coach who will not expect a reaction and will not enforce a reaction. And indeed, there are very many good professionals in that team who will, no doubt, for their own personal pride, turn up next Friday. So I expect a far better performance from us. And it's good that we're playing Argentina, because they will certainly test us, and it's not we're not playing, with all due respect to them, we're not playing in Japan, where we can, just paper over the creases and what have you. So it'll be a good test. It'll be a tough test, but I think it's what we need to take this huge thorn out of our side from Friday night.
Absolutely. Like someone said on Facebook, we definitely have credit in the bank, and we definitely they've earned the right to be given the opportunity. And it's good that we have a quality team like the Pumas coming in as well in our very next game, exactly 7 days later, same venue. It might be very much a similar team. Injuries aside, it might be very, very similar 23, and they'll get a chance to show what they can do and improve the standard. So hopefully they'll get that chance then. Well, that's brilliant, lads. Many thanks again to Tom and Rich for joining me. Hope to have you both on again soon. Thanks, lads.
Thanks, Jeff.
Cheers, Rich. Cheers, Jeff.
Nice to see you, Tom.
As for our next batch of Harpin, keep an eye on our YouTube channel during the week for our latest bonus chat, and also our 80 plus column, which will post on Wednesday. Next, we'll be turning our attention to Friday's match against Argentina. So be sure to follow us on any or all of our social media platforms, which you'll find at linktree/Harpin On Rugby. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Slán.